Okay, so imagine you're at the store, picking up like milk and cereal, just a normal Tuesday. And suddenly there's this like commotion sirens, police rushing in.
Yeah.
And it turns out there's been a shooting right there, like in the produce aisle.
Unfortunately, it's not just hypothetical, right? I mean, that's the reality we're facing more and more these days, even in the most like mundane settings.
Yeah, and it's enough to make anyone feel kind of uneasy.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, what is going on? Why are we seeing these disturbing things? How do we even like make sense of it all?
Right.
And that's what we're diving into today.
Exactly.
We've got this stack of headlines, each one more unsettling than the last. And we're going to unpack what happened, explore those human stories, and try to understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I think it's not about sensationalizing these events. It's more about staying informed, being aware, and maybe even having some like difficult conversations that we might otherwise shy away from.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's start with a case that really blew up on social media. The story of Nurse Hannah. You might have seen her videos on TikTok and, themingly typical mom sharing snippets of her family life.
Right.
But then one video went viral for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah, it was a simple scene, just Hannah's husband approaching their son in the grocery store. The child flinched and like the internet went crazy, interpreting it as like a sign of abuse.
And Hannah, whose real name is Hannah Hyatt,
Yeah.
she insisted it was just a game, between father and son.
Wait.
But the online court of public opinion had already passed judgment, internet sleuths. They dug up old videos scrutinizing everything from her discipline to her choice not to see a doctor during her pregnancy.
It's a dangerous trend. I think this case shows the weaponization of social media to police parenting choices, without understanding the full context or offering support. It's like everyone's become this armchair expert, ready to condemn and criticize based on these fleeting glimpses into somebody else's life.
And it's particularly harsh for mothers,
No.
wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. We hold mothers to this impossibly high standard, expecting perfection in every aspect of their lives.
Yeah.
And social media, it just amplifies that, creating this breeding ground for judgment and shame. And I think it's important to remember that, parenting is complex.
Hmm.
It's deeply personal.
Yes.
And what works for one family may not work for another.
One of the things that struck me about this case was the way people fixated on Hannah's frugality. She posted videos about her family's budgeting strategies, but viewers were really disturbed to see that her son often didn't get a full meal at restaurants.
It's interesting how quickly we jump to conclusions about someone's financial choices and often assume the worst.
Yeah.
There could be so many reasons why a family might opt for a smaller meal for their child, and it's not always a sign of neglect.
Of course, we can't condone any form of child abuse,
Yeah.
but it's crucial to approach these situations with nuance,
Mm-hmm.
recognizing that there's a vast spectrum of parenting styles,
Yeah.
financial realities.
Right.
And in the Nurse Hannah case, it was the authorities who had to investigate and determine if there was any legitimate cause for concern.
The Ogden, Utah Police Department actually opened an investigation into Hannah based on the volume of online reports.
It's a reminder that the internet can be a powerful tool for accountability, but it can also be a breeding ground for misinformation and mob mentality.
Right.
It's a balancing act, and it's important to engage in these conversations with both caution and compassion.
Now, from the complexities of online judgment, let's shift to a story that unfortunately hits closer to home for a lot of our listeners, especially those with children or grandchildren in school. A tragic case that unfolded at a small, tight-knit community school in Northern California, Feather River Adventist School.
Picture this, a school nestled in the rolling hills of Butte County, a place where everyone knows each other, where children feel safe and secure.
This school had just 35 students, a real testament to those close bonds within the community.
And then on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday, that sense of security was shattered.
56-year-old man named Glenn Linton. He arrived at the school under the guise of enrolling his grandson.
Okay.
Met with the principal, everything seemed normal, and then without warning, he opened fire.
Can you imagine the terror that must have gripped those children and teachers?
Yeah.
It's the kind of nightmare every parent dreads, a fear we try to push to the back of our minds.
Tragically, Linton shot 2 young children, Roman Mendez, just 6 years old, and Elias Wolford, only 5, before taking his own life.
It's a story that sends chills down your spine, a reminder of the vulnerability of even the most idyllic communities.
Right.
It makes you wonder what could possibly drive someone to commit such a horrific act.
Well, in Linton's case, there was a history of troubling behavior. He had a long criminal record, struggles with mental health, and had been researching weapons online.
Wow.
There's even speculation that his motive might have stemmed from religious extremism and anger over the U.S.'s involvement in the Middle East.
It's rarely just one factor, is it?
Right.
It's often a complex interplay of circumstances that lead to these tragedies.
And this case, I think, is a reminder that just focusing on mental health as the cause of gun violence is kind of misleading and oversimplifies a very complex issue.
Right.
We need to address a multitude of factors: access to firearms, social isolation, the glorification of violence in our culture, and yes, providing adequate support for mental health issues.
Yeah.
It's a multifaceted problem that demands multifaceted solutions.
It's enough to make any parent feel helpless.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to remember that we can advocate for change.
Right.
We can support organizations working to prevent gun violence.
Right.
And we can have these open and honest conversations with our children about these issues.
Now let's move from a small-town tragedy to the heart of New York City, where a high-profile shooting left investigators baffled and the public captivated by its strange details.
This case felt like something ripped from a crime novel, a story with twists and turns and bizarre clues that had everyone trying to piece together the puzzle.
The victim was Brian Thompson, the CEO of United Healthcare, shot in broad daylight on a busy city street. Security camera footage caught the suspect, a young man in a dark jacket and hoodie, but his face was mostly obscured by a mask.
It was a seemingly random act of violence, a high-profile executive targeted in the middle of the day. But then the details started to emerge, and things took a very strange turn.
At the crime scene, police discovered something unusual. The bullet casings were engraved with the words "deny, defend, oppose," a clear reference to legal tactics often attributed to healthcare insurance companies.
It's like the shooter was trying to send a message.
Exactly, and the message became even more cryptic when they found a backpack abandoned in Central Park. Inside, Monopoly money.
Monopoly money, that's bizarre. What do you make of that?
Well, it's a detail that speaks volumes about the suspect's mindset, even though we don't fully understand its meaning. Was it a symbolic statement about corporate greed?
Right.
A psychological game by the perpetrator? It's a detail that continues to fuel speculation even now.
Weeks went by and the case went cold. But then a lucky break, a tip from a McDonald's customer in Pennsylvania, led to the arrest of 26-year-old Luigi Maggione.
And here's where the case takes another unexpected turn.
Okay.
Luigi, at least on the surface, seemed like the last person you'd expect to be involved in such a crime.
He came from an affluent family, excelled academically, graduated as valedictorian from a prestigious prep school, earned degrees in computer science from UPenn, and had a successful career as a data engineer.
Right.
It's the classic case of someone who, on paper, seemed to have it all.
Right. The perfect image of success and stability, which makes his alleged involvement in this crime all the more perplexing.
Yeah.
Challenges our assumptions about who is capable of violence and reminds us that there's often a hidden side to people's lives.
Right.
A darkness lurking beneath the surface that we may never fully comprehend.
It's a chilling reminder that even in a world saturated with surveillance and online data, human behavior can still be incredibly unpredictable.
Absolutely.
And the motives behind seemingly senseless acts can be difficult, if not impossible, to fully understand.
But despite his seemingly clean record, there were some unsettling details that emerged after his arrest.
Okay.
He was an avid reader, very active on Goodreads, posting reviews of hundreds of books, including some with rather disturbing themes like The Autobiography of the Unabomber. And his Twitter account went silent a few months before the shooting, prompting concerned messages from friends.
It's like pieces of a puzzle, each one offering a glimpse into his psyche, but never quite forming a complete picture.
And then just before his arrest, a chilling YouTube video was uploaded under his name.
Oh, wow.
It began with a countdown and the words, "If you see this, I'm already arrested." The video concluded with the message, "All is scheduled, be patient, bye for now."
That video added a whole new layer of mystery and intrigue to the case. Was it a genuine message from Luigi? A hoax designed to mislead investigators?
Right.
Or perhaps the most unsettling possibility, evidence of a larger conspiracy?
Right.
It's a question that continues to haunt this case, and one that we may never have a definitive answer to. But it certainly highlights the complex ways in which social media can be used to communicate, manipulate, and even incriminate.
It also underscores the power of online platforms to shape narratives and influence public perception.
Luigi is currently awaiting trial, facing charges of murder weapons possession and forgery.
As more details emerge, we'll continue to follow this case closely, trying to piece together the motivations behind this seemingly inexplicable act of violence.
And now from a shocking corporate shooting to a bombshell lawsuit rocking the music industry, let's turn our attention to a case that has captivated headlines and sparked intense debate. It's a story that delves into the murky world of power, celebrity, and accusations of abuse, a case that involves one of the biggest names in hip-hop, Jay-Z.
This case raises a lot of difficult questions about accountability, the dynamics of power and fame, and the impact of such allegations on both the accused and the accuser.
It all started with a lawsuit filed by a woman identified only as Jane Doe.
Right.
In the lawsuit, she alleges that Jay-Z, whose real name is Sean Carter, sexually assaulted her when she was just 13 years old.
The alleged incident occurred at a party after the 2000 MTV Video Music Awards, a star-studded event where Jane Doe, according to the lawsuit, managed to sneak in with the help of a limo driver.
The lawsuit paints a disturbing picture. Jane Doe claims she was given a drink that made her feel disoriented, and that Jay-Z, along with Sean Diddy Combs and an unnamed female celebrity referred to as Celebrity B, entered the bedroom where she was lying down.
The details of the alleged assault are graphic and disturbing.
Jane Doe claims that Jay-Z held her down while Diddy raped her, and that Celebrity B stood by and watched.
Wow.
The identity of Celebrity B has become a subject of intense speculation online, with some suggesting it could be Kim Porter, Diddy's former partner, while others speculate it could be Beyoncé, whom Jay-Z met around the same time. It's important to note that these are just speculations and no evidence has been presented to support these claims.
Right. It's crucial to separate speculation from fact, especially in a case like this where reputations are at stake.
Jay-Z has vehemently denied the allegations, calling the lawsuit a blackmail attempt and challenging Jane Doe to file criminal charges.
He also expressed his heartbreak for his family, particularly his daughter, who is now old enough to understand the nature of the accusations.
In a strongly worded statement, Jay-Z accused the plaintiff's lawyer, Tony Busby, of being an ambulance chaser, seeking to exploit the situation for financial gain.
Busby, a former Marine, fired back, accusing Jay-Z of attempting to intimidate his client and vowing to continue pursuing the case.
Adding fuel to the fire, Beyoncé's mother, Tina Knowles, accidentally liked an Instagram post about the lawsuit, sparking further speculation about the family's reaction to the allegations.
This seemingly minor social media mishap became a major talking point, highlighting the intense public scrutiny surrounding the case.
And as if things couldn't get any more complicated, singer MIA entered the fray, claiming that Jay-Z had pressured her to get plastic surgery when she signed with his label.
This added another layer of complexity to the public's perception of Jay-Z, raising questions about his treatment of women and the power dynamics at play within the music industry.
It's a case that has divided public opinion, with some vehemently defending Jay-Z, while others express outrage and support for Jane Doe.
It's a reminder that even in the court of public opinion, there are multiple perspectives and interpretations of events, and ultimately it will be up to the legal system to determine the validity of these claims and ensure that justice is served.
Now, from the glamorous world of music and celebrity, we shift to a heartbreaking story of unimaginable neglect, a case that truly underscores the importance of community awareness and protecting vulnerable children. This case, it really shook me to the core. It's a reminder that sometimes the most horrific things happen behind closed doors, hidden from the public eye.
It's a stark reminder that child neglect is a very real problem, a pervasive problem.
Yeah.
And it's often the most vulnerable members of society who suffer the consequences.
This case unfolded in Indiana, in a seemingly ordinary neighborhood where a 2-year-old girl was found dead in a locked closet. The conditions of the apartment were described as deplorable. Just a scene of utter squalor, trash, piled high moldy pots, dirty diapers strewn about.
It's hard to even fathom how any child could be subjected to such an environment.
Right.
And tragically, this little girl's suffering was compounded by the actions of her own parents.
They had placed a space heater in the closet with her turning it up to the highest setting. Can you imagine the heat, the fear, the utter helplessness that poor child must have endured?
It's a horrifying thought, and the autopsy revealed the extent of her suffering. Her internal body temperature reached a staggering 109.4 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh my God.
That intense heat combined with the prolonged confinement ultimately led to her tragic death.
It's just unfathomable that any parent could do this to their child. And what makes it even more disturbing is that they had 2 other children, ages 3 and 5, who were also living in those appalling conditions.
Thankfully, those children were removed from the home by Child Protective Services. They were reportedly covered in lice and in desperate need of medical attention. It's a testament to the resilience of children that they were able to survive such neglect.
It makes you wonder how these cases slip through the cracks. How can a child be subjected to such abuse without anyone noticing, without anyone intervening?
It's a question that haunts us all, and while we can't undo the past, we can learn from these tragedies and work to prevent them from happening in the future.
It's a reminder that we all have a role to play in protecting children. If you see something that seems off, if you have concerns about a child's well-being, don't hesitate to speak up.
You might be the only voice the child has. Your call. Your report could be the difference between life and death. It's about being vigilant, being aware, and understanding that child abuse can happen anywhere, even in seemingly normal families.
It's a heavy topic, I know, but it's a conversation we need to have. And amidst these horrific stories, it's important to remember that there are also stories of hope, of resilience, of individuals who are working tirelessly to protect children and create a safer world.
Absolutely. There are countless social workers, teachers, law enforcement officers, and everyday citizens who are dedicated to making a difference in the lives of children.
So what can we do? How can we make a difference?
Well, for starters, we can support organizations that are working to prevent child abuse and neglect. We can volunteer our time, donate to charities, or simply spread awareness about these issues.
We can also educate ourselves about the signs of abuse and neglect so that we're better equipped to recognize it and report it if we see it. Knowledge is power, and the more we understand about these issues, the better prepared we'll be to make a difference.
It's also about fostering a culture of support and compassion. A society where parents feel empowered to ask for help when they need it and where children feel safe and protected.
It's a tall order, but it's a goal worth striving for.
Yeah.
And every step we take, no matter how small, can make a difference in a child's life.
Now, as we move on to our final story today, it's worth reflecting on a common thread that runs through all these cases. It's the question of how we discern truth from fiction, especially in a world where information is so readily available and constantly bombarding us from all directions.
It's a question that's become increasingly urgent in the age of social media, where narratives can spread like wildfire, often without any regard for accuracy or context.
We've seen it in the Nursana case, where a brief video clip sparked a wave of accusations and judgment. We've seen it in the speculation surrounding the Jay-Z lawsuit, where rumors and conjecture have overshadowed the actual facts of the case. And we've seen it in the way that misinformation can contribute to fear and division, particularly when it comes to issues like gun violence and child abuse.
So how do we navigate this complex information landscape? How do we develop the critical thinking skills necessary to sift through the noise and arrive at a more informed understanding of the world around us?
Well, it starts with recognizing that not everything we see or read online is true.
It sounds obvious, but it's easy to get caught up in the emotional pull of a story, to accept something at face value without questioning its source or its veracity.
We need to develop a healthy skepticism, a willingness to question what we see and hear, and to seek out multiple perspectives. It's about going beyond the headlines, digging deeper, and considering the potential biases or agendas that might be shaping the information we're consuming.
It's also about being mindful of our own biases, recognizing that we all come to these stories with our own preconceived notions and worldviews.
Absolutely, and those biases can influence how we interpret information, even if we're not aware of it. So it's important to be open to challenging our own assumptions, to consider viewpoints that might differ from our own, and to engage in respectful dialogue, even when we disagree.
It's a lot easier said than done, right? Especially in today's polarized climate, where it feels like everyone's digging in their heels and refusing to budge from their entrenched positions.
It's certainly a challenge, but it's a challenge worth embracing, because the alternative is to allow ourselves to be swept away by the tide of misinformation, to become passive consumers of narratives that are often designed to manipulate and divide us.
It's about reclaiming our agency, our ability to think critically and form our own opinions based on evidence and reasoned analysis. It's about recognizing that truth is often complex and multifaceted, and that there's rarely a simple answer to the challenges we face.
It's about embracing nuance, seeking out diverse perspectives, and engaging in constructive dialogue that moves us closer to understanding rather than further into division.
It's a journey, not a destination, and it's one that we all need to embark on together.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final thought, a question to ponder as you navigate the complexities of the world around you.
In an era of information overload where truth and fiction often blur, how do we ensure that our voices are grounded in facts, in empathy, and in a genuine desire to understand?
It's a question that deserves our continued attention, a question that challenges us to be more discerning, more compassionate, and more engaged in the pursuit of truth.
Thanks for joining us on this journey. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a new set of fascinating and thought-provoking topics. It's easy to get caught up in the outrage, especially online. It's almost like a reflex these days. See something shocking, fire off a tweet, join the digital mob.
Right.
But as we've seen in some of these cases, that rush to judgment can have real consequences.
What's fascinating to me is how social media has really amplified this whole phenomenon. It's like this global echo chamber where emotions are heightened, nuances are lost, and everybody's vying for the most righteous take, you know?
Right.
And it's a recipe for misunderstanding and even harm.
Yeah, the Nurse Hannah case is a prime example. A split-second flinch captured on video and shared out of context, and her life is turned upside down.
Right.
It raises a question that we keep coming back to. How do we balance holding people accountable with that basic presumption of innocence, especially online, where things can just spiral so quickly?
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
It is.
On the one hand, we want to protect the vulnerable and make sure that justice is served, but we also need to guard against this culture of instant condemnation where people are tried and convicted in the court of public opinion before all the facts are in.
And it's not just about individual. Think about the Jay-Z case, a lawsuit alleging a very serious crime. The details are disturbing, but the truth remains elusive.
Right.
And yet, his reputation is already taking a hit, fueled by speculation and all this online chatter.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder about the lasting impact of these allegations, even if they're never proven in court.
It speaks to the power dynamics at play, especially when you have a figure like Jay-Z, a global icon with immense wealth and influence, facing accusations from someone who, at the time of the alleged incident, was a young teenager.
Right.
It's a situation where the court of public opinion can become this battleground with each side vying to control the narrative.
It's a stark reminder that we need to be cautious consumers of information, especially in these high-profile cases. It's easy to get swept up in the drama, but we have to remember there are real people involved.
Right.
And the truth often lies somewhere beyond those sensationalized headlines.
It's about cultivating a discerning eye, a critical mind, asking ourselves who benefits from this narrative,
Right.
what evidence supports these claims, what alternative perspectives might be missing from the conversation. These are the questions that can help us navigate this really complex landscape and come to a more informed understanding.
And that brings us back to something you mentioned earlier, the importance of empathy. It's easy to demonize people online, to reduce them to caricatures or villains in our own self-righteous narratives.
Right.
But as we've seen in these cases, there's often more to the story than meets the eye.
Absolutely. Every person involved in these stories, whether they're the accuser, or even the bystanders caught in the crossfire, they have their own complex set of circumstances and motivations.
Yes.
And it's easy to lose sight of that when we're caught up in that outrage cycle.
So how do we cultivate more empathy in this digital age? It seems like we're just bombarded with so much negativity, so much division. It can be hard to find that space for compassion and understanding.
It starts with recognizing our shared humanity. We all make mistakes, we all have vulnerabilities, and we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect.
Yeah.
Even when we disagree, even when we're confronted with challenging viewpoints, it's possible to engage in dialogue with a sense of empathy and a willingness to listen.
It's about stepping back from the keyboard, taking a deep breath, and remembering that there's a human being on the other side of the screen.
It's about recognizing that these stories, these headlines that we dissect and analyze, are ultimately about real people whose lives have been impacted in profound ways.
Yeah.
And it's about approaching these conversations with a sense of humility, acknowledging that we don't have all the answers.
Right.
And that the truth is often far more nuanced than we might initially assume.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with this thought. In a world that often feels defined by outrage and division, let's strive to be a force for understanding, for empathy, and for thoughtful engagement. It's a challenge, no doubt, but it's a challenge worth embracing.
And remember, every conversation we have, every interaction we have, can be an opportunity to bridge divides, to build connections, and to create a more compassionate and informed world.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into a new set of fascinating and thought-provoking topics. Until then, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.